beings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us, and to all joyous and suffering beings everywhere. So we're continuing with our study of the Gita. We're coming close to the end. We're starting chapter 16, Divine and Demonic Tendencies. Sri Krishna says to Arjuna, a man who is born with tendencies toward the divine is fearless and pure in heart. He perseveres in that path to union with Brahman, which the scriptures and his teacher have taught him. He is charitable. He can control his passions. He studies the scriptures regularly and obeys their directions. He practices spiritual disciplines. He is straightforward, truthful, and of an even temper. He harms no one. He renounces the things of this world. He has a tranquil mind and an unmalicious tongue. He is compassionate toward all. He is not greedy. He is gentle and modest. He abstains from useless activity. He has faith in the strength of his higher nature. He can forgive and endure. He is clean in thought and act. He is free from hatred and from pride. Such qualities are his birthright. Now, this is a complete description of what Sri Krishna mentions in chapter 3 as the Sthita Prajna, a person of divine nature. Before we go on to the demonic tendencies, are there any comments or questions about what we've heard? Well, let me just say that when Swami Prabhavananda was studying with Swami Turiyananda, he remarked, of course, these are the same qualities in a more summary form that Adi Shankaracharya mentions as the qualifications for a student of Advaita Vedanta. Swami Prabhavananda remarked, well, if you can be all that, then you've already achieved everything. Isn't it so? And Swami Turiyananda just smiled and said, I see you have solved the problem. So this is not something for us to think, oh, I'm not these things. I'm not like that. No, this is the ladder for us to climb. This is Jacob's ladder. Jacob's ladder, for those who know the metaphor, is the spine. The climbing to the ever higher centers. As Jacob saw this ladder, he saw angels going up and down this ladder to the divine presence. And his insight was that these angels were there to help. And indeed they are. The divine presence in the form of the devas in the form of our guardian angels, to put it in Judeo-Christian terms, are indeed there to help. And they are the servants of the divine. So when we ask for these qualities, then the divine presence in its many forms helps us to uncover them. Because that's what Sri Krishna means by such qualities are his birthright. They exist within you already. There's nothing to be gained from outside. And as we climb Jacob's ladder, we spontaneously begin to manifest these things. And by the time we reach the heart center, and it is quite a climb from the third center, which is the center of our worldliness and our apparent power in the world. So it's quite a climb from there to the heart center. But when the heart center opens, then these qualities begin to manifest. But it's still a struggle against the effects of the gunas, which are constantly playing across our samskaras, that is to say, those mental impressions that have been left in us by our past experiences. And it doesn't matter whether you think about it as reincarnation or DNA. It really doesn't matter. You have arrived where you are in this lifetime as the result of much evolution. And so whether you think about it as mental impressions left from other lifetimes that your subtle body has experienced, which is the Sanatana Dharma expression of it, the explanation, or whether you accept the scientific explanation that you manifest the DNA that has evolved over all these many, many millions of years, billions of years actually. It really doesn't matter. Here you are right now with your Jacob's ladder, your set of mental impressions, samskaras, and you know them well. You know them well because you can feel the gunas ring those chimes. You know? Today my mood is this. Tomorrow my mood is that. And it'll sometimes change in as little as 15 minutes. Something awakens in you, and what was a dark mood will suddenly, you'll hear a song, you'll read a poem, you'll remember some passage from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Well, all that is, according to Krishna, the effect of the gunas. And so we spontaneously begin to manifest these things as our spiritual practices take us higher and higher on Jacob's ladder, the spiritual centers of our spine. So any comments or questions for anyone before we read on?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam.
I'm thinking that when it says he abstains from useless activity, that would be things that takes one away from progressing in the spiritual path and acquiring more sattvic kind of qualities. So things like gossip and hurtful behavior, because in the world, secular world, so to speak, anything that is not quote unquote productive in terms of a material sense is considered useless. Like you've got to be always learning something, doing something, contributing something. Anything that is not that would be considered useless. Whereas sometimes just sitting and contemplating is, if it's helping us progress, it would still be in the useful.
Yes, exactly, Swaya. And I'll tell you a story. When Swami Prabhavananda was very active in the 50s and 60s, 1950s and 1960s, and there were lots of monks and nuns. Swami Prabhavananda knew that these young people needed some entertainment, some diversion from their constant spiritual discipline and life in the monastic world, the convent and monastery. So he would take them to the movies. And the monks would sit on one side of him and the nuns would sit on the other. They would all go together as a family. That's how he always dealt with them, as a family. So the monks would sit on one side and the nuns would sit on the other, and they would go to a good movie. But it would be noticed that after a little while, Swami Prabhavananda was no longer paying attention to the movie himself. He was making japa. He was in the presence of these nuns and monks. He was sitting there doing japam on their behalf to lift them up. The japam wasn't for him, of course, it was for them. But he happily took them to the movies and was glad that they enjoyed it. Brahmadas, were you going to say something?
Yes, that I remembered Swami Yogashananda talks about that in his book, Seven Lighted Candles, where he talks about the different swamis he had interacted with.
Six lighted windows.
Six lighted candles, sorry.
Six lighted windows.
That's right, six lighted windows. That's what it was. It was a while.
Just not to correct you, but just so somebody
thank
wants
you.
to
I
go,
appreciate that.
if
Really.
somebody wants to go looking for the book, they won't go looking
Okay, I
for it.
totally got it. I got it kind of, sir. I got the concept right.
You did indeed. And then he later wrote another smaller book called Four More Lighted Windows about some other swamis that he had known. So yes, that story is told in Six Lighted Windows.
And I had never heard Jacob's ladder compared to the spine before and moving up the chakras of the spine. That was an interesting comparison, and I'll always remember that.
You'll find it in esoteric Judaism as well. It's not just an idea of mine. It is in the Kabbalah. You will you'll find that this idea is there. Their idea is that all of Torah is metaphorical. All of Torah is a very complex and interrelated metaphor. And so they definitely have the idea of Jacob's ladder as the spine. And we won't go into all that.
The Kabbalah Jews also believe in reincarnation, which is
yes, that's true. Anything else from anyone before we go on? This next is a bit rough.
Brother Shankara, this first part reminds me of the Saint Francis of Assisi, who achieved all that. Where there is a hatred, let me sow love. It reminds me of him. Who has
Yes, indeed. All 12 of the saints in that book, Love Poems from God, manifest and speak of these attributes, this way of being. And it's because a knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. A knower of God becomes God. And that's why those poems are called love poems from God and not love poems from 12 saints. God reached through. Hafiz, the section on Hafiz starts with him saying, I am a hole in a flute that Christ's breath blows through. Listen to this music. I am a hole in a flute that Christ's breath blows through. Listen to this music. That's the opening poem of Hafiz's section in that book.
Thank you.
So that is the summary of the divine tendencies. Now we'll go to its opposite. Sri Krishna says to Arjuna, when a man is born with demonic tendencies, his birthright is hypocrisy, arrogance, conceit, anger, cruelty, and ignorance. It isn't as if those other qualities do not exist within the one even who is born with demonic tendencies, but they are submerged below this characterization. When a man is born with demonic tendencies, his birthright is hypocrisy, arrogance, conceit, anger, cruelty, and ignorance. The birthright of the divine nature leads to liberation. The birthright of the demonic nature leads to greater bondage. And if you reflect on the people you've known in your life and the people you know of in this life, you can definitely see the truth of these words. The birthright of the demonic nature leads to greater bondage. But you need not fear, Arjuna. Your birthright is divine. So just right away, Krishna reassures Arjuna, nothing here that you need to worry about. In this world, there are two kinds of beings, those whose nature tends toward the divine and those who have the demonic tendencies. I have already described the divine nature to you in some detail. Now you shall hear more about the demonic nature. Men of demonic nature know neither what they ought to do nor what they should refrain from doing. I'll repeat that. Men of demonic nature know neither what they ought to do nor what they should refrain from doing. Their ignorance is so profound that they simply are not able to recognize what they ought to do or what they ought not to do. What a pitiable condition. So our task is not to judge these people. Of course, we restrain them from antisocial behavior based on their ignorance. But it is our job to pray for them, to wish them well, to see what we can do to make their lives less burdensome. Men of demonic nature know neither what they ought to do nor what they should refrain from doing. There is no truth in them, or purity, or right conduct. They maintain that the scriptures are a lie, and that the universe is not based upon a moral law, but upon godless, but is not based on a moral law, but godless, conceived in lust, and created by copulation, without any other cause. Because they believe in this, because they believe this in the darkness of their little minds, these degraded creatures do horrible deeds, attempting to destroy the world. For those of you who know the Devi Mahatmyam, these are the great asuras who hate righteousness. They attempt to destroy the world. Now we see that very clearly in this tag end of the Kali Yuga. Such beings are in positions of power. They are enemies of mankind. Their lust can never be appeased. And by lust, it isn't just meant for sensual pleasure. Their lust for money, their lust for power, their lust for anything that will aggrandize them. Their lust can never be appeased. They are arrogant and vain and drunk with pride. They run blindly after what is evil. The ends they work for are unclean. They are sure that life has only one purpose, gratification of the senses. And by that, it's meant in the wider sense. Their sense of ego is part of that. And so they are plagued by innumerable cares, from which death alone can release them. Anxiety binds them with 100 chains, delivering them over to lust and wrath. They are ceaselessly busy, piling up dishonest gains to satisfy their cravings. I wanted this today. I wanted this, and today I got it. I want that. I shall get it tomorrow. All these riches are now mine. Soon I shall have more. I have killed this enemy. I will kill all the rest. I am a ruler of men. I enjoy the things of this world. I am successful, strong, and happy. Who is my equal? I am so wealthy and so nobly born. I will sacrifice to the gods. I will give alms. I will make merry. That is what they say to themselves in the blindness of their ignorance. But the fact is that they just say they will sacrifice to the gods. They just say they will give alms. They don't really do it. They say it to themselves to make themselves feel better. And they may promise it outwardly, particularly if they're in the political sphere. But they don't do it. That is what they say to themselves in the blindness of their ignorance. They are addicts of sensual pleasure, made restless by their many desires, and caught in the net of delusion. They fall into the filthy hell of their own evil minds. This is what I mean. This must engage our compassion. This must engage our compassion. They fall into the filthy hell of their own evil minds. So then, rather than, naturally, we're not going to feel good about them and what they do. But the Christians have a sweet saying: hate the sin, love the sinner, or abominate the sin. That's the Catholic way of saying it. Abominate the sin, love the sinner. They fall into the filthy hell of their own evil minds, conceited, haughty, foolishly proud, and intoxicated by their wealth. They offer sacrifice to God in name only, for outward show, without following the sacred rituals. These malignant creatures are full of egotism, vanity, lust, wrath, and consciousness of power. They loathe me. This is what's meant by the asuras, these great asuras. They hate righteousness and everything that embodies righteousness. So of course they loathe Krishna or any other embodiment of the divine. They loathe me and deny my presence both in themselves and in others. They are enemies of all men and of myself, cruel, despicable, and vile. I cast them back again and again into the wombs of degraded parents, subjecting them to the wheel of birth and death. And so they are constantly reborn in degradation and delusion. They do not reach me, but sink down to the lowest possible condition of the soul. They don't reach me in this life. Everyone's destiny is to, to come out, even these dark ones, they come out of the darkness eventually. Hell has 3 doors: lust, rage, and greed. Hell has 3 doors: lust, rage, and greed. These lead to man's ruin. Therefore, he must avoid them all. He who passes by these 3 dark doors has achieved his own salvation. Lust, rage, and greed. Now, Sri Ramakrishna mentioned lust and greed as the 2 most powerful in this Kali Yuga. Rage, of course, is there, and Krishna mentions it in chapter 3 when he says, it's anger that costs us, who, even if we are well along the path, if we become addicted somehow to some sensual thing, and then our addiction is thwarted, we become angry, and so lose our discrimination and the fruits of our experience. But he who passes by these 3 dark doors has achieved his own salvation. He will reach the highest goal at last. But he who flouts the commandments of the scriptures and acts on the impulse of his desires cannot reach perfection or happiness or the highest goal. Let the scriptures be your guide, therefore, in deciding what you must do and what you must abstain from. Now, it doesn't take much imagination to say, where's a good summary of all of this from the scriptures? And come to the conclusion that, oh, it's in the beginning of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. He has in his yamas and niyamas a very, very clear summary of what you must do, the niyamas, and what you must abstain from, the yamas. So it isn't like we have to read all of the scriptures and figure out what they're telling us. Yes, if you read the Upanishads, you'll find all kinds of guidance. But you don't, then you have to, so to speak, assemble it for yourself. Patanjali so kindly assembled a workbook for us in which he just says, this is what you must not do. This is what you must refrain from. And this is what you must do. This is what will lead you higher. So we don't have to go scouting around through the scriptures. First, learn the path of action, karma yoga, as the scriptures teach it. Then act accordingly. And of course, what does karma yoga tell us? Karma yoga tells us to offer everything to the divine. That's also the last of the instructions in the niyamas. So let the scriptures be your guide, therefore, in deciding what you must do and what you must abstain from. First, learn the path of action as the scriptures teach it, then act accordingly. So that's the end of chapter 16. Any comments or questions, any discussion of anything that we heard here?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam.
So when he says here that he who passes by these three dark doors, does he mean that those who have overcome lust, rage, and greed, or those who have been able to just literally pass by without entering the doors?
It's interesting you should ask that question. In the Logions of Christ, these statements of Christ in the Gospel of Thomas, Thomas, Thomas. Christ's shortest instruction is be passers-by. Be passers-by. All of these things continue to exist even in the illumined soul in vestigial form. But to pass them by, this is what Krishna says also. How does he say it exactly? Could you read what it says, Swayam? What does he say exactly about passing by the doors of?
It says, he who passes by these three dark doors has achieved his own salvation.
Yes. It's exactly the same instruction as I just quoted from Christ. Pass them by. Don't open that door. Don't even put your hand on the doorknob. Just keep on moving. Keep on moving forward. As Swami Swahananda used to say with this wonderful gesture. He would make this gesture like this: go forward, go forward. And so that's our instruction. So that you've hit on it, Swayam. It's not that you have conquered the mental impression or the potential. It's that you simply learn to keep moving and don't engage it. Is another instruction. It's in both the scriptures of Sanatana Dharma and in the Christian scriptures, is be indifferent to it. Just greet it with indifference. No. So even the illumined soul, as long as they remain embodied, we're told by Adi Shankaracharya that they continue to have this vestigial potential because it's contained within Maya. It's contained within the gunas. Good question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else at all?
Brother Shankara, do you remember from your high school days, did you ever have like high school bullies who were kind of mean, cruel people?
Oh, yes.
Did it seem like they filled this category of hypocrisy, arrogance, conceit, anger, cruelty, and ignorance? It seems like they meet all those qualities. That's
Yes,
how I
yes,
remember them.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. One afternoon, I got slammed up against the lockers.
Okay, so yeah, they seem to fit all these checks on the checklist. So we know where they're
Yeah,
going.
well, yeah. And some of them, they remained that way. Some of them also died young.
Yes,
Those guys.
one actually that I knew committed suicide. There's different rumors. One is he was a drug overdose, another was a suicide, but we know he died. We know that for sure.
Yeah.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
so when I was in practice, I also saw some kids who would act out all these demonic tendencies, but upon investigation, there was some kind of a deep hurt inside them that
Oh, yes.
they were not able to deal with, and they manifested it in a wrong way by some tendencies like that. They went through some really rough.
How much would it hurt to be born into the family of degraded parents? How much pain would there be to be born into such a family, which is what Krishna says. They returned again and again to the wombs of degraded parents. Yes, they have some very deep samskaras of terrible pain.
We want to make sure to share that pain with you.
Well, yes, of course, they're good at sharing their pain. Just as someone who has a brighter nature is good at sharing their joy and their happiness and their bliss.
So that fellow who slammed you up against the lockers, do you know anything about his life, his parents?
No, let's not. I'm almost sorry I mentioned it.
Okay. Because the bully I knew, his parents were quite abusive. I found out later.
I just wanted you to know that I did know exactly what you were talking about.
Right.
Yes. But what Swayam just pointed out, and what Haima knows so well from her work as a therapist, we all have this well of darkness within us. It's there in every one of us. So we learn to deal with it as best we can. And those darker expressions of it, lust, rage, and greed, we learn to walk by those doors, not even reach for the handle. But when we do, we pull our hand back and just keep moving. You can feel it in yourself. You can feel it in yourself. Anger is there in every one of us. It'll be stimulated by certain things. Greed is there. Lust is there. It'll be stimulated. Or do you persist? Or do you do what Patanjali says? Replace that lower samskara with a higher one. For all of you who haven't read Swami Prabhavananda's book, How to Know God, which is his translation and commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is such a beautiful, beautiful workbook for spiritual practice. That's why he created it. It was created for his disciples so that they would have a workbook for the pursuit of yoga. And the title is How to Know God by Swami Prabhavananda. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, Brother Shankara.
Yes, Aaron.
Is this dark side, which you speak of, like similar to what Carl Jung wrote about when he talked about the shadow?
Yes, of course. It's precisely the same.
I'm not familiar with that. Aaron, could you share that with us?
Well, I'm not like an expert or anything, but Jung wrote about how there is an unconscious shadow side to every like personality, and often these are dark tendencies which could be lying dormant in us. Is that correct, Shankara?
Yes, and sometimes they're not so dormant. Sometimes they're quite evident. We feel them quite strongly. If you read the life of Sri Ramakrishna, you find that dark side existed even in him, because he had all the liabilities of a human being, but it came out of him and was killed by an ancient sage with his trident. Not the master's trident, with the sage's trident. This dark being, which is Sri Ramakrishna said, looked like myself, came out of him and was killed by the sage. And so this is why he was able to be free of that shadow side for the rest of his life and be as simple as a child and guileless, absolutely guileless. One of the aspects of that shadow side is deceit, guile, calculatedness. And Sri Ramakrishna it was simply absent from him. But he was the master of the universe. We must learn to walk by the door that leads to that personality aspect of ourselves. The doors that lead to that personality aspect of ourselves.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Michele.
Hi. Wouldn't that be, though, your belief in the dark side, the illusionary self? Because there's really, the reality is there's only oneness, and we do need help. We need assistance to be able to see it, but it's fear that takes over. So once you step out of the fear, then you...
Oh, very, very well said, Michele. Exactly. This is the whole purpose of spiritual practice, is to uncover within ourselves that which is more powerful, that oneness, that unity that is more powerful. But in the meantime, we live in the realm of duality. And so this is why Krishna says, learn to walk by those doors. Learn to pass them right by, pass by those doors.
It's a process. Like you said, Jacob's life.
But you're absolutely right, Michaela. We are fundamentally beyond good and evil,
Well,
beyond the duality.
would it be also kind of like how Christ said, get behind me, Satan? He said something in that respect. It's like he didn't believe in that.
Yes. When he was tempted, in his final temptations after the 40 days, this is the story, Christ's final temptations, the liar, as he calls him in the Gospel of the Beloved Companion, the liar says, well, you're hungry, you've been fasting, here, take this stone and turn it into bread. You can do it. And Christ says, but man does not live by bread alone. And so then the liar, the accuser, takes him to the who is being an aspect of the divine, transports him to the top of a tower and says, oh, go ahead, jump. The angels will catch you. You know they will. And Christ replies, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And then, get thee behind me, Satan. He doesn't say, poof, you're gone. No, that isn't going to happen. But he says, get behind me. I will walk in front. Well observed.
Do you feel Satan was similar to Mara, who Buddha faced and had to put behind him? Is that a similar?
Sure. Of course. All those temptations that the Buddha faced.
Yeah, I thought that was a similar story. Mara did the
Very
same stuff to
similar,
Buddha. Yeah.
Yes. Great inconceivable penances are required. This is what it says in the Chandi and the Devi Mahatmya. Great inconceivable penances are required for your realization, which is why the great ones come, because they know perfectly well that we're not capable of this. So we need their help. We need to be able to share in their spiritual treasure. And so that's what they offer us. Come to me, they say. Come. They'll never push themselves on us. Never. But as Holy Mother said, if you go one step toward God, God comes 100 steps toward you. And so, what does it say in the evening hymn? Thou, speaking of Sri Ramakrishna, thou hast finished with fear and with doubt, standing firm in the vision of God, refuge to all who have cast fame, fortune, and friends away. Without question thou shelterest us, and the world's great sea in its wrath seems shrunk to the puddle that fills a hoofprint in the clay. Ah, what a relief that feeling is when it comes on us. But of course, it doesn't stay with us always. And so we work at it day in, day out, day in, day out. That's our blessing and our task. but it is emphatically, it's simple, but it's not easy. Anything else?
Brother Shankara,
Yes.
I have a small story about a hunter and two parrots. You may have heard this before. I don't know. But I just want to, it seems this relates to part of our demonic traits. This hunter who got two parrots, he was selling in the market. One, he priced it as $500, and the second parrot, he priced it as $5. His rule is, whoever buys $500 one, they can buy it independently. But if they buy $5 one, they have to buy two of them. So nobody bought that. And then everybody kept walking away. And then the king comes on an elephant and he stops by and he wonders why you are selling 500 one, $5 another one. He says that's the way it is. If you buy, king wanted to buy $5 one. He said, no, if you buy $5 one, you have to buy the 500 one too. But if you buy 500 one, you don't have to buy the $5 one. King decided to buy both of them. He took them home and he told his servants, put one of the $500 one right next to his bed when he in his bedroom in the cage. And then by the time king got up next day morning, before sunrise, this parrot started saying, Ram Ram Sita Ram, just like Jesus and Allah or whatever the chant. Chanting Ram Ram Sita Ram. And the king was so amused and so happy. And he said that, oh, I love this parrot, keep him. And then bring the next day, the other parrot next to my bed. So the other parrot came, and the next day morning before the sunrise, this parrot started cursing him out right and left. And king said, take this parrot and kill him. And then the other parrot said, please, king, don't kill him. He's my brother. When we were born, two people got both of us. One, I went into the home where is the virtuous home, who raised me with all the scriptures and all these. So I learned Ram Ram Sita Ram, and that's how I grew up. My brother, who went with another guy, he went with the evil person who had taught him all the cursing. That's what he was raised by. That is how he became like this, but he wasn't born that way. That's what he said. It's you know, sometimes maybe they may have demonic qualities born, but the environment, how we created for that. I thought,
well, this is the endless debate among people in your profession.
it is.
How much is nature and how much is nurture?
Nature has been a debate for many decades.
Yes.
So
And
nurture, yeah, nurture does help. A lot of times if there is a positive environment, it does make even the demonic person probably a little better human being.
well, this is why Swami Prabhupada encouraged us to make japam
Yes.
for those who we felt any negative feelings toward,
Yes.
because that purified us and it helped them.
Agree.
And the Swami was asked, Swami, does that kind of prayer really work? And he spoke sharply back. He said, yes, what do you think? You're disconnected? You're not connected? We're connected. Albert Einstein said, you know, whenever anything in the universe vibrates, the whole universe vibrates. There is no such thing as separation. And japam is a vibration. So we can make a difference simply by the quality of our hearts. So it isn't that we want to engage with these people, as Krishna says in the very early part of this chapter, you know, avoid evil company.
Mm-hmm.
But but we can, and we're encouraged to make japam. for everyone.
Definitely agree.
Thank you,
Thank
Haima, for that story. That's a good story.
Thank you.
It's the kind of story that Swami Swahananda would have liked. He loved those kinds of anecdotal stories. He loved telling them himself.
I think that story can be taken to another level because that's kind of the way this world is. Like you don't get the good parrot without getting the evil parrot too.
That's right. You don't.
And they're brothers. They're inseparable. That's this world. The
Yes,
book
they're
you would
born. They're
recommend-
born of the same. They're born of the same. Yes.
Yeah.
Well said. Well
And the
said.
book you recommended by Swami Prabhavananda, How to Know God, is that what that's called?
Yep.
And it's his translation of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras?
Translation and commentary, extensive commentary.
And the end of the story, Brother Shankara, the king finally let that he told the servants to go and leave him in the forest somewhere, that bad parrot. So kept the good parrot. That was the end. See, this can't be around them. We cannot be around them if they don't want to change.
Yes, well, it's interesting that was the only punishment among many of the Native American peoples, was to put you outside the tribe. If you wouldn't behave, if you were antisocial, you simply were put outside the tribe. You were made an outsider.
But I think in tribal societies, that was a death sentence. I mean, no, you couldn't live alone. You know, you'd be out in the forests.
Yeah. Well,
especially for like a woman or a pregnant woman who wasn't physically strong enough to survive out there, that was a death sentence.
Ramadas, we can speculate all
Okay,
about
yeah.
who might be put out, but that I was just observing that what Haima said about putting the other parrot out in the forest, which would
Right. And I'd heard that too, that some tribes would exclude you from the tribe, and that was your punishment.
right.
Something I'd given some thought to.
Anything else from anyone? Okay.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Michele.
I want to tell you thank you that every time you have a class, it just hits me. It's like opening up the book of Ramakrishna and just coming to the right thing that you need in your life at that particular time. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this, that it's everyone that's attending your class online. And so I just wanted to tell you thank you.
Well, Michele, of course, you're very welcome. And all I can say in response is Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. It is all Saraswati. So, Om Asato Ma Satkamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Abir Moiti. Oh, dearly beloved Lord, lead us from your manifest reality to your absolute and eternal reality. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all joyous and suffering beings everywhere. Let it be so. So, good night to you all. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. Go in Mother's loving and protective embrace. Our world is deeply troubled in many, many ways. For those of you who are interested, and I hope you're all interested in one way or another, American Vedantist, the latest issue of American Vedantist, is being published this evening, tonight. You can find it at americanvedantist.org, O-R-G. And if you're not already a subscriber, you may be moved to become a subscriber. But you can find the latest edition probably tomorrow morning. I think a test issue of it is in my email box now for me to review, and then it'll go out. And it's quite a compilation of interesting material designed to be uplifting and bring us some joy and some just to uplift, spiritual uplift for us. American Vedantist number 77. All right, dears. Good night. Next time we'll have the opportunity to get together in this way in any event is Saturday morning at 11 o'clock when we study Swami Prabhavananda's book, Realizing God. And then on Sunday morning, we'll have the joy of being together in an open forum on the subject of the devotional path, bhakti. And there'll be a study guide attached to your newsletter this week. If you don't receive the newsletter, you'll find that study guide on the website and on our Facebook page, and that will be so by tomorrow evening. So, a great good night to you.
Good night, Guru.
As my great grandfather would have said, a great good night to you. May you rest well and rise strong. All right. Good night.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.